What a day. October 7th, 2024. 1 year ago, a couple hours earlier, Hamas, an arm of the Ayatollah Khomeini from Iran, launched a large-scale surprise attack on Israel, a sovereign nation for the last 75 years, marking one of the deadliest days in Israel's history. Hamas militants crossed into, invading the territory, attacking communities near the Gaza border, murdering women, children, totaling over 1,200 souls, and taking hundreds of hostages from over 100 countries. This attack was a part of a broader escalation in a long-standing conflict that the Palestinians, the Ayatollah Khomeini, Hezbollah, Houthis, and others have been retaliating strikes against Israel for just existing. The conflict has basically turned into widespread devastation. Families being destroyed, houses being destroyed, with no end in sight. These are just some politically correct terminology describing what happened a year ago today. Welcome, everybody, to the Rant Network. This is a podcast where my co-host, David Solomon, and I peel back the layers on a multitude of topics without holding back a thing. Here it's about raw, unfiltered dialogue that serves as an outlet to voice opinions, share ideas, and exchange and experiences from every corner of life. As we dive into this current event, sit back and try and relax as we really dig into these big questions as we tackle this event. David, it's been a year.
Mm-hmm.
In this year, we've had over 8,000 ballistic missiles and rockets fired that no country in the history of the planet has ever received without annihilation in either retaliatory fire or in conquering. It just never ends. And the people of Israel sit there day in and day out with a people who swear to destroy them, yet the media refuses to portray the facts in the media. In the free world, what exactly goes on there? Now, look, you're wearing a dog tag. You know, that dog tag means a lot to you and to millions of people wearing them all over the world. And you know what? Unless you know what it is, you have no idea. It's a piece of jewelry. David, what do you got to say?
Stuart, this dog tag, as you said, represents reminding us that there are still 101 hostages, of which we believe 36 are dead, of the original 255 hostages that were taken September the 11th. This shirt I'm wearing today, which says Isko, which was remember, with 710 embedded in here. This is what we do. We remember. We do not forget. So let me start from the beginning. You did say the number, 1,200. But actually the number is right now more like 1,700. 728 soldiers have been killed. 882 citizens been killed. 75 police officers killed since October 7th, all in the name of defending a state. Those are just plain statistics. Here's what you don't hear, Stuart. There are hundreds of thousands of Israelis, millions of Israelis today dealing with families with loss. They've each lost someone. There isn't a family in Israel that hasn't been scathed by this event. You have 60,000, 70,000 Israeli citizens that have had to escape the north because they're being fired on by Hezbollah. You have hundreds of thousands who've had to leave the south and find new homes, schools, institutions, because it wasn't safe to live in the south. Rockets are being fired from 7 different fronts, not just Stewart listed Hamas, Hezbollah, Houthis, Iraq, Iran, West Bank. Last week, just to give you an idea of the scale of the devastation, 2 terrorists in Jaffa opened fire at a train station. I mean, there's no end. Stuart, what people don't realize is that October the 7th, with its devastation, should have been a lot worse. The original plan was to attack Israel on 3 fronts hard, very October 7th like. Hamas would do the southern attack, Hezbollah would do the northern attack, and the other terrorist organization with Israel through the West Bank in the east. Had that occurred as originally planned, there would be no state. But that's not talked about because that's politically incorrect. We're not talking about the devastation and the hurt and the pain that generations will suffer in Israel, because we only want to talk about the so-called 41,000 Palestinians that have perished. Now, I'm not here to say today that their deaths are meaningless. But again, this morning, as they talk about the numbers, only a handful of media outlets are willing to tell you the truth about the 41,000. Number one, that the number is inaccurate. Okay, that it's a number made up by the Hamas-led Ministry of Health. And that even if we were to take that number for real, 17,000 of them plus are terrorists, militants, combatants, whatever you want to call them, which makes this war the most, civilian deaths in war are normal. But the Americans, the Brits, the French, no other country took such care of civilians like Israel. But again, why should we distort the fact that Israel went out, invested millions, billions of dollars in Israeli infrastructure to secure its civilians from an outside attack? Bomb shelters, Iron Dome, you name it. Where did the money go in Lebanon, West Bank, Gaza? Billions poured in from all over the world. They went into tunnels. They went into buying guns, not to protect their people. So while you hide behind these civilians, death will happen. We've seen it in Lebanon, and we've seen it in Gaza. We've seen it in the West Bank. The leadership doesn't care about their civilians. They're fodder. Stuart, October 7th will be etched in our minds for the rest of our lives. There's no doubt about it. My family, your family, there isn't a Jewish family today that doesn't have some sort of in Israel. But let me take one more minute, if I may. Because today, while you are watching this recording, I'm en route downtown to stand up with university students who've suffered mercilessly since October the 7th, senselessly, with horrific acts of anti-Semitism, physical intimidation and violence, threats, chants of death to Jews, chants of go back to Poland, chants of from the river to the sea, chants of intifada, chants, you name it, the chants haven't stopped. And these students have suffered absolutely badly because our governments, our universities have let them down. And of course, the media. Ladies and gentlemen, October the 7th is not a day for Israel, it's a day for the West. The West has lost in the last 12 months. Israel has been the only one to fight for the West. And assholes like Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, Justin Trudeau, and other leaders have shown that they don't understand nor do they care for the Israeli state. Because if they did, they would stand side by side with her against the terrorist Stuart. But instead, what October 7th, 2023 reminded us is that Jews are alone, Israel is alone, and the West is blinded by its politics and its electioneering, and not for your lives.
It's a pretty hard pill to swallow, David. And, for some of our viewers and listeners who don't really understand what's going on in the Middle East, not because they live under a rock, but it's not covered. A sovereign nation's a sovereign nation. An invasion's an invasion. What would the U.S. do if it was invaded on any border? What would Canada do if it's invaded on any border? Canada is on the cusp of being invaded by Russia, literally on a day-by-day basis out in the northern reaches, which we call the Arctic. The United States is being buzzed in Alaska by Russians trying to play how close can we get into your space. China is encroaching on countries all over the world. Russia stormed into the Ukraine. But these countries have the right to defend themselves and are portrayed as basically people doing the right thing. However, the media refuses to acknowledge what is the law. United Nations, the invertebrate speak house of the planet, looks like a scene from Star Wars where the Republic sits in an arena just making themselves feel good as a band of villains with a few good souls still remaining. But like most organizations that want to believe in this woke movement and feel good and pacify, will ultimately fail. You know, the former, I believe they call him the president of Iran that's exiled, even he is now saying how the Ayatollah must be removed from power and that the insanity must stop to exist. Now, he's not a lover of Israel either. But why are,
who are you talking about?
yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Okay.
But nevertheless, he as well is calling to the end of this insane, barbaric, what seems to be a religious crusade of the modern era, but without anyone causing pause, embracing and trying to make people feel good, thinking that they will assimilate to a frame of mind that is common sense. Unfortunately, as he stated in his interview, that is something that is not possible with people the likes of this. You know, with the Abraham Accords almost fully absorbing the entire modern Middle East, it goes to show you that Donald J. Trump actually had the right idea. Most of these countries refuse to allow anyone to breach their sovereign space, meaning Iran, Houthis, Hezbollah, and actually didn't permit it and allowed the U.S. strike force to fly through and around their countries without any reservations. Now, this wasn't put on the front lines of the news because they too don't want to be in a quarrel with a Tasmanian devil. Sorry for insulting my favorite cartoon character. But this is literally out of a cartoon book. You would never believe this could actually be happening in the modern era. That's how barbaric this is, David. It's mind-twisting.
But Stuart, you know what? It's interesting because what the media also will not tell you. And I stood yesterday arm in arm as we walked down the streets of Montreal, chanting, "Let them go home." Look at the list of the hostages still remaining. They're not all Israelis. They're not all Jews.
No.
That doesn't matter. It's interesting also to note, you talked about Iran, how Persian, former Iranians are standing side by side with Israel for the last year because they realize, they know what Iran is up to, and that their country has been stolen from them by the Ayatollahs and by these Muslim clerics and extremists. And now the Lebanese and Syrian communities have stood side by side with Israel. Why? Because Hezbollah has ruined their country. Hezbollah has destroyed their country. And yet, what ends up happening, Stuart? The same story, the same crap, the same lies. The media does not want to portray Israel as the victim. Never can. Because that victimhood in politics, in media, in the universities, goes against what they have been pushing as a narrative. The Jew's been the bitch. Israel's been the bitch. It's been, no matter what side you are on, she's your enemy. If you're on the hard left, she's your enemy. If you're on the hard right, she's your enemy. She's been blamed. If you go back almost a year, when a plane that they thought was filled with Israelis went going to Russia, they attacked the plane. When you think of the attitude on campuses, that they think you could be Jewish or supporting Jews, how they attack you. This is remnants of what we've seen 90 years ago, 100 years ago, 150 years ago in Europe, in the United States, and you talked about it, and it's amazing how the response is, yeah, but. There's always a yeah, but. Israel's can never be right, yeah, but. Even on October 8th, Stuart, they were calling for a ceasefire. Israel hadn't fired a single shot, hadn't retaliated, but Israel's already been condemned. And speaking of condemnation, the United Nations, if there's any proof that the United Nations is complicit with terrorists, look what's happened in the last year. Where is the Red Cross to help the hostages?
Forget
UNICEF?
Nations. No, United Nations people were part of the actual October 7th attack.
UNICEF has hidden. They won't hide. They won't even go help the children that are in captivity, but they're running to help Palestinian children. UNRWA, Stuart, the head of the United Nations Relief Work Association, the head of the teachers union. By the way, just so you know, according to statistics by the Palestinians, 90% of them go to UNRWA schools.
Yep.
And the head of the teachers union was just killed in Lebanon because they found out, shock of shock, it's a Hamas terrorist leader. The leaders were teaching in the schools, paid by your tax dollars. Your Stuart in the United States, mine in Canada, went to go and teach terrorism. And if there is any wonder why country after country after country, by the way, the only country in the world right now, Switzerland, passed legislation after looking into and listening to both sides. They will not give a dime to UNRWA. No more. What they did is they said they're going to find an alternative way to help Palestinians in a humanitarian way. But UNRWA is written off. When the world does its homework and realizes what's really going on there, that's when their change will be. When somebody tells me the Middle East is complex, I tell them, actually, it's quite simple. The solution to this problem is simple. When the other side stops viewing Israel as the enemy, lays down its arms, and says, we are ready to talk, we're on our way to peace. Until then, war is inevitable.
David, and that's a wrap for today's episode. A huge thanks for lending us your ears, your eyes, and your time. Please try and take a moment today and reflect what happened a year ago. And I also want you to consider what you would do if you were attacked in this sort of vile manner. It's been a real pleasure, unfortunately, even on these sad and horrific topics, sharing our thoughts, discussion with you. Your support means the world to us. We're excited to welcome you back for another engaging, insightful discussion every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, noon Eastern, always unfiltered, unedited, as you could hear from our dialogue. It's very straightforward. Stay connected with us on the social media channels. Please hit the subscribe button. That's the only way we get ahead of the crazies.